I think I want to start off by saying that I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, and a lot of people in the room have seen this document before. We have made some updates to the document, to the framework presentation. I think more importantly, what I want to point out is the fact that we're into the fall semester, and I know when we spoke when I was at Newhouse in the spring in May, we talked about re-engagement with the campus community. Well, this is the start of that re-engagement. So as you go through here, you're going to see that some of the slides may be the same, but there have been updates to many of the slides that throughout the framework. And I would like at the end of this an opportunity for Eddie and I to take as many questions as you guys have for us. You know, we're here to be as informative as we possibly can, and to try to help everyone understand where we're going with the future of the framework. Again, the framework had 3 strategic goals. Obviously, we'll go through each one of those. You know, to support academic excellence. You know, the idea was to really strengthen the global legacy of learning and investigation by creating 21st century academic research and environments across the university. What we're doing through part of that right now is part of that promise of fall engagement. Myself and Chris Danik have already met with 5 deans on the campus to go through and ask them, hey, what's important to you? You know, let's talk about enrollment numbers. Let's talk about classroom space. Let's talk about meeting space. You know, how are things working in the current capacity? What can we do to help you in the future? How are some of the academic improvements that we've made? And you'll see that as we go forward through the framework, some of those things that we're going to point out. Enrich all aspects of student life. Foster student success through a holistic residential experience. Engage in student life centers and comprehensive academic administrative support network. And a diverse array of health and wellness offerings. So the last piece is probably the most important there in the health and wellness offerings as we get into the deeper part of the framework and we talk about the ARCH project, which you'll see when we get in there, there's a really good rendering of what the ARCH is going to look like and how it will tie into the wellness piece. So I guess really the health and wellness, so I always mix up the two. Is the wellness the actual fitness center, is the wellness the part where we merge the health center in. So the health center will merge with the ARCH, so you'll get those two together, and I think it's just a much better experience for the students, and we'll get into that a little bit different. And then a little bit farther into the presentation. And then continue to enrich the environment with high quality placemaking buildings, landscapes distinguished by design and excellence. And I think obviously the promenade speaks to this very quickly. It was something that was done this summer, and when you talk about creating a vibrant campus setting, that just comes at you very quickly. And I will say I want to thank my staff at Physical Plant, especially Jim Miller and his crew, because in the 30 plus years I've been here, I've never seen this campus look the way that it does. And we heard that over opening weekend over and over and over. And as you look at the next slide, the promenade was part of the university, the key recommendations that were in the early phase of the framework. I look at this as you go through those slides. Sometimes I think, do I really want to show this slide? And I look at the university place in the future. I don't want everybody to focus on the different colored bricks and the concrete, because that isn't going to change. So again, this is a rendering by Sasaki, and basically what it's doing is it's speaking to what great opportunity we have with potentially renovating the Shine Center and Byrd Library. I know that the Chancellor's been engaged with some potential donors, and we asked Sasaki last February, who worked very closely with Rebecca Reed Cantowitz and her group. There was about 10 of us on the group with Lou Marcoscia and the Sasaki team, speaking to what the needs of the Shine Center could be. What does it make sense to tie the Shine Center into the Byrd? It was something that we spoke with David Seaman about and his team. I've then since met with his team as one of the dean groups that we met with and talked through that. And I think, it also opens up Shine Center to the rest of campus. And we know there's a lot of needs, and it was a good opportunity for us to try to benchmark where we need to be from a prospective donor, where we think we would be from what that would be, to naming opportunities, to what we think the overall cost would be of that renovation. So it was trying to get out ahead to get us into the next part of the framework and what we thought if that could be something that came next. And again, funding has a lot to do with where you go from that. So the revitalization of the academic core. Again, this is a Sasaki rendering, and I know this is the rendering that drove a lot of people crazy on campus that the physics building's gone. So what it does is it tries to tie, when you get off that bus and you come across the Orange Grove, it brings that academic core right through the main heart of campus. It opens up the old arch to the actual quad, and if you go back and look at some of the old pictures from the university, the front of arch is absolutely gorgeous. The beautiful archway up in the front, and when we get into some of the renderings a little farther into the framework, which people haven't seen, you're going to notice that thanks to Jennifer Champa out of CPDC and Brenda Law, they've worked with Populous on a day-to-day basis on preserving the beauty of that building and how do we enhance and bring that building back into the face of the quad. And if you notice, it'll align Carnegie and Bound, those three buildings, there's a lot that tie those three together. And with the way the physics building is now, that goes away. You don't see that beauty. So this allows people to really open up that core to the campus again and really change the whole face of the campus. Again, we asked Sasaki to help with us through creating a campus-type city community. And, you know, we wanted to look, hey, it does snow here once in a while. I know this summer was quite hot, but we're gonna get snow eventually. And we wanted to show what it could potentially look like up University Ave. So what you see on the left is what could be a potential when you look at the framework. It calls for a new building, maybe beyond the Sheridan University where the parking garage is. That parking garage to me is kind of an eyesore, so that takes you up past that. What that new Shine Center, how beautiful that could look. And basically, you know, you look at what they did at Newhouse with the Dick Clark studio. This is actually on this side of Waverly. That could be in the framework. It shows a potential building there. Well, what could that be? I get asked that question quite a bit. That could be a, you know, the Welcome Center. It could be an admissions office. It could be many different things. But again, it was a guide. It's a map of, you've got this beautiful potential on this campus to open up and bring the city into the university. And that's what this slide kind of shows, which I think this is a beautiful slide. And again, this next one, I get a lot of comments on this slide. As you know, bring and integrate the west part of campus into the main campus. What was the goal of this slide? And I don't like showing this slide because again, it's a rendering, and there's a lot of steps there for Jim's guys to be shoveling. So basically, that's the difference with Grant Auditorium removed. And again, that always raises some eyebrows, but remember, we're building a 1,000-seat auditorium in the NDRC. So that would take the place of that current auditorium. But this opens up and ties the campus together. And if you look at the framework document, you'll see that there is potential for buildings on the west side of campus. And we wanted to come up with a way to bring the two together. It shows a little bump out on the Carrier Dome. That is something that we've discussed from time to time, and how people flow through there. Our biggest challenge is how do we deal with the elevation changes between the dome and Heroy. There's some challenges there to that back door of Heroy. We want Heroy to be more of a focal point. It is absolutely gorgeous, that atrium at Heroy, if you've ever been in there. And there's a great look at campus through there. And imagine that beautiful atrium at Heroy looking out without the physics building there. You get that great look of campus and people coming at you from both sides, east and west of the campus. I think that if we can ever get to that point in the framework, it's going to be absolutely beautiful. Again, so this look here, I love this slide. So this slide talks about the mixed-use neighborhoods, and it is actually where the NDRC would be on Waverly, and that's the Dick Clark studio on the right, and an imagination of what the Shine Center could look like with a total glass front facing the streetscape. One of the things that you'll notice is the loading dock at Shine is gone. So today, I think I got my monthly email from a former board of trustee who is very frustrated with all the cars on the back of the Shine Center. I'm looking at my Shine Center staff here. So they're trying, our goal, I thought Joe Carpy was coming. I see Dee is over there. Our goal, I'm going to share that email with you this evening before we go home, is to, and we've had this conversation, all the event production trucks that are back there, all the people that park there, This has now become the front door to the campus. We are going to move the ambulances by the start, hopefully before the semester break, sometime in November. That project, Chris is working on that project, Chris Danek and Doug Tankersley, along with Mark Hansel, I saw came in the room. It is a project that we were contemplating happening, but I asked Joe Alfieri from the office to make sure that we follow through with it, because that was one thing that this gentleman will never let me forget. He absolutely really dislikes the look of those ambulances right there at our front porch. And again, all the cars that are parked there. So I bring that up today, and I know I'll get emails, well, where am I going to park? I park there every day. Well, Joe has a plan. We have a plan. We have a plan that talks to parking and deals with everyone who will lose their parking spot when the NDRC is built. So that is something we need to probably push out here shortly as that project moves on. But this changes that streetscape. And I'm going to actually, Eddie was going to ask me some questions later on in the presentation, but I want to bring it up now. So one of the things that came out in the framework too is called the Waverly Promenade, Waverly Ave Promenade. Well, bad choice of words. So there's a grant that got moved back to 2018 with the city of Syracuse. It's a streetscape grant. It's curb to curb. It will help us deal with the different traffic flows, the bike lanes, repave the entire street. I don't know when was the last time any of you guys were down through there, but the street is a mess when you get down past Shine Center and you're heading towards Comstock. It's brutal. And those bike lanes and that street has changed so many times, it'll tie all that together. It'll help with exactly what you see with some of the plantings. So by no means is it anything like the promenade that you see, which is currently the university place. So priorities. So the campus framework is a 20-year roadmap that aligns the academic strategic plan with the university physical campus environment. So some of the areas where the two plans intersect include providing an unparalleled student experience, fostering a culture of discovery and research, sustaining an inclusive and accessible campus, and ensuring distinguished veterans programs and services. So that talks about some of the projects that came out of the box first. And again, you talk about the student experience. You talk about the pushback we got on the promenade, and a lot of that was a communication piece, and I'll take the knife for that. But when you look at the student experience of what's going on down at that promenade now, that's exactly how this framework played into that. And a lot of these things were driven by the Sasaki research that was done. As we get into the discovery and research, there's if you look at the framework, it talks about a science building that could possibly be in the future. Accessibility in campus. One of the things we did this summer was brought Danny Human, who went to school here in the 90s, who is now a consultant with us at the campus of planning, design, and construction and physical plant. Danny's on campus at least twice a month. He stays at the Sheridan when he's in town, and he attends all the meetings associated with the dome renovation, the arch renovation. He was involved in the promenade project. Danny actually trekked the promenade all summer long, played a big part in a sidewalk that was poured in the promenade that came across from Newhouse, that at the time we were going so fast, the actual percent of grade was very poor. It was something that was brought to our attention, and we went ahead on the university's plan and just tore that brand new sidewalk up and changed that grade up almost 70 feet. So those are the kind of things that having Danny on the staff, he sees what goes on here every day. We engage him with people on campus. He goes to the meetings and he's with the architects on a regular basis. He'll play a big role in the ADA upgrades when the Carrier Dome eventually is renovated. The veterans programs, there's over 1,000 students here at Syracuse University right now with some type of veteran connection. Mike Haney gave a report yesterday that, to me, that's amazing. So that's either someone that's a dependent of a veteran, someone that is back from serving in the military and going to school. So the NDRC building will play a huge role in that, and I'm excited to get that going. We're moving along. I'll talk a little bit about that for those of you who park down in that Waverly lot. So the university owned the parking lot that we have fenced off. The city had entered into a lease with the university which had expired quite some time ago. So we took that lot back after speaking with the city. We're trying to use as much of that as possible to not displace our people, our staff at Syracuse University. We're doing the best we can with that. Right now we're in this process of removing all the PCBs and asbestos, just doing all the abatement that we do here at Syracuse University. You see we coned off some areas today because we're doing some geotechnical surveying, looking at around the footprint of the building, what's underneath that building, and obviously we've had to survey that building, that property, to know where we're going to go. We're hoping our target is sometime in October, maybe early November, with some help from Jennifer Champa, who does all the permitting for campus planning, design, and construction. You want to talk about somebody that's busy and who I respect unbelievably. She does a great job. That is a thankless job, and she's working hard to get that done for us so we can knock it down. You can't just knock a building down. The amount of meetings and scheduling and all the permitting that Jen goes through is amazing, and I've learned so much from her in 1 year. It's amazing, but we'll get through it. We're close. She's gone through the different channels that she needs to get where we need to, and I think we'll be there before you know it. So you guys will be seeing that building coming down this fall. Some of the campus framework priorities, obviously sustainability. I see that Nate Pryor is here, who's our sustainability coordinator, who works with us at Campus Planning, Design, and Construction, also runs the steam station, and oversees the energy management group. Obviously, he's very involved in these projects. We talk about mobility issues, you know, the land use, active landscape design. Julia, who works, Michael's Speaks assistant, will work with the architects to help us with the landscaping around all of these buildings. She actually designed the landscaping around Deneen. It's worked really well for our physical plant group that has to maintain it. So it's great to have people that are involved in this campus and see what we do every day to do that. Again, from the social side of it, and basically the energy efficiency is very important to us. One of the things that Sasaki did, they spent a lot of time on campus and surveyed and basically just observed the mobility issues on campus. Obviously the major pedestrian circulation routes, and you know, today I was walking across campus. Yesterday, Chris Danik and I were looking for space for SU Abroad, and we just happened to be between class breaks. And I'll tell you, when it breaks and you're on that quad, if you don't step on one side of the sidewalk or the other, you're going to get run over. And it was amazing to watch how that major pedestrian flow goes. And poor Jim, I've asked Jim to replace sod on one side of one sidewalk every week this spring or this fall, and I think we don't want to increase the width of the sidewalk. I said, Jim, if we increase it, I ran into him 10 minutes before this, if we increase it 4 feet, then they're going to walk 4 feet farther to the grass on that run. So it's just hard to see how that circulation goes. You got to step back and take a broad look at, okay, what is the mobility and where are people going? And one of those things that we talked about early back at Newhouse in May was, okay, do we re-engage and then look at what we call the front lawn, and how do we get that to the 5% grade consistently across the board? One of the things that I heard after the promenade was open was the walkway in front of Newhouse that takes you up to what I call the main monument by the Pan Am Memorial. The only way we could open up that side was to put some steps in there. Well, even if we were to try to take this whole front lawn to 5% accessibility, we're going to have to add more steps to the front lawn. It's something we don't want to do. We've been working with Sasaki to try to have some ways to flow as you go up, but we know that the students won't follow those paths. So again, it's probably not something that we will get to right away in the framework, but it's something we really need to address. And I think what really surprised me was when you stand up in front of Link, between Link and Heinz Hall, and you look at that beautiful now whole segment that goes right down to Byrd Library. I mean, it is a beautiful vision. That is one of the most accessible areas. So Joe Alfieri and I met 2 weeks ago, and I think that maybe Jim Bloom was with us, and we talked about either putting in a switchback next to Heinz, if that's something we could do, or I studied a design that they did at the Metrodome this summer where they had a walkway, so you have to go over a rail line to get into the Metrodome, and they actually put an elevator in that takes you up to that level, and then over and then you walk across and it comes down. I almost said to Joe, geez, it'd be nice if we could get a donor to help us do that same thing right next to Heinz, between Heinz and Machinery. How cool would that be that you could come right up that walkway and it'd be all glass, it'd be beautiful atrium, you come in, you go up, and you're right on the quad. I mean, that is incredible flow. There's those big mechanical units there that we're going to eventually remove, but right now we're putting some fencing up, thanks to Jen again for getting the permitting, so that you hide those. That whole section there just drives me crazy with seeing mechanical units where you go into the heart of our campus. So this has been This has been a tough part of the project, the campus framework wayfinding. So we've entered into an agreement. We've had an agreement on the table with Pentagram talking about some of our typeface and on campus and some of our branding. Pentagram does a great job around the country with wayfinding and signage. So we have just really started the engagement with them. We're working with Nikki Brown in her office. We know that that's a huge priority, obviously with a virtual environment. This slide's a great slide. You know, how many times does everybody see you'll go on campus and the students are looking down at their phone, right? I mean, everybody does that. Even I do it all the time. I actually bumped into somebody today and it was Jim. I'm calling Jim and I bumped into him, right? And he's laughing at me, so you probably knew I was calling you. But, you know, I mean, those are the kind of things we talk about, better information on the buses, better information on the bus stops. We need to do that. That's something that Joe Alfieri's working on right now with a group in our office. The lighting. We had a conversation today in this room when I first came in about lighting for Orange Central, what things we do and don't like to do. So it's just, how do we get smarter? How do we do the right things? The digital signage is going to be huge. Apps on phones, people being able to wayfind through their phone. It's part of that Live Safe app that Chief Callisto has gotten out there to our students. We talk about blue lights. We had a very long conversation about blue lights on campus and why there isn't a blue light on the promenade. There's really not a blue light. There wasn't a blue light there before. There's a blue light over by Lyman or maybe over by Smith on that sidewalk on College Place, and talking about maybe one down by the stairs at Krause. But, you know, with the Live Safe app, I mean, Tony went through the stats, and it's really not something that, you know, any of us felt that we needed to do. But definitely as you go through and you look at if you ever looked at the stats from Chief Callisto, you'd understand when the blue lights get activated. It's typically after a Carrier Dome event, late in the evening, or very late on a Thursday or Friday night. So the summer and fall engagement, part of what I talked about when I first started. So just some of the summer recap. I mean, today, I thought 120 was a big number, but you know, through our office this week, we've got 232 active construction projects going on this campus right now. So Debbie Morrow and Joe Alfieri and Terry in our office went through we had a budget meeting today with the budget office and Gwen Judge's direct reports, and we went through and looked at every project to see where we are, where does the project stand, what the spend has been on the project, and how we're going to go into next summer. And it just, I started counting as they started talking about the projects, and I got onto the 7th page. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I thought the 120 active ones plus over the summer were a lot. It's just amazing how this campus evolves day after day after day. The $9 million of classroom enhancements that were done with Sam Scazafava's group, who handles all the IT on campus along with Jenny Gluck, those things don't happen without that team. They do a phenomenal job. They work with Lemp, who helps with the classroom technology. The $4 million in the ADA improvements. One of the improvements you're going to see some of the ADA access to Link Hall to the auditorium. I believe that's wrapped up. Mark, is that project close to being done? And then we have the new ADA ramp going in that's heated, so we don't have to worry about that being shoveled in the winter. But we also put in an elevator at Krause Baird. We did that this summer, and there were many other projects around campus. I could list 100 of them that were going on that tied into different mobility issues. Infrastructure upgrades. We basically, we're doing some work on the roof over at Krause. We replaced 7 roofs this summer that we knew needed to be done. The siding had blown off that building on Life Science in that really bad windstorm. That had to be replaced. So we inherited a lot of things that needed to be done this summer along with the roof on Flanagan. So those are different infrastructure upgrades that are going on, along with all the different power upgrades that we did under the ground that people don't even see. The Krause Chimes project, that was started out as a maintenance issue. 2 years ago when the Chancellor came on campus, he had a company come in and look at the bells in the Krause College, and the actual bolts and the framing that held some of the bells that are over 3,000 pounds a piece had really deteriorated. And when they showed us what those bolts look like when they got in here this summer and did the replacement, it definitely needed to be done. It was something that kind of fell through the cracks the last couple of years. We moved it to a priority 1, and then the chime masters asked that we add 3 bells or four bells to the, was it 4, Jim? To the actual tower, so it allows us to increase what the students can play. We actually talked to them and said, hey, there are times when you're not here, we'd like to be able to operate the bells. So there's a remote automation system into Krause College now that will allow us to play the bells when the students aren't here, understanding that we take all our direction from the chime masters. They play a big role in that. That is not something we would do without them. Of course, the promenade and then the West Campus project at the Arch. Some of the engagement opportunities, the weekly emails, I know you guys love those emails. I hear so many great things, and I love Sarah Scalise, because without Sarah, those emails wouldn't happen. She's unbelievable. Joe Alfieri helps feed the information to those. We then critique them with Kevin Quinn before they go out, and I think they've been great. I've heard wonderful, wonderful things. The bi-weekly construction meetings, we're going to re-engage with those again as we go forward. The campus planning website was updated. All the project information is on the facility, syr.edu. The closures on facility, syr.edu. And sometimes I'm surprised at the emails I get from people who don't want to know when we're having power outages at buildings and don't really care about some of the things that are going to affect everybody's life in a negative way. I get people that ask me, please take me off this listserv. And, then we take them off, and the road's closed up at and you can't get through. And then I'm getting an email saying, why didn't you put something out about it? So it's interesting how those things work out. And then obviously the parking website and then the campus framework website. Those are all great areas to go in to get information, and I recommend that you do that. These are the lists of the open forums that will be going on in the fall. Again, these are scheduled for us to gather information. I mean, one of the big pushbacks when we talked about the promenade in the beginning was the benches. So we went back to Sasaki 2 or 3 weeks ago when the students were coming back on campus. We've watched very closely on what's going on with the existing benches. Now, those benches were benches we purchased for other areas on campus. That is our standard teak bench that you see all around campus. But to Jim Miller's point, let's put those, we'll get those, put them in place because we have other areas for them. So when Sasaki came back with 4 options, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I didn't like any of them. So, and some of them weren't much different from the pushback we got when we were talking back in May at Newhouse in those different information sessions that we had. We told them that one of the options has got to be what's wrong with what's there, because we see how people are enjoying those benches, and can we tweak them and maybe put, a U-shaped set of benches there so people can look at each other when they're engaged on the promenade so that you're not all in a line. So we're looking at that stuff, and we've asked Sasaki to go back to the drawing board. They're going to bring us another set of options. I believe we were supposed to have them by Friday, but I'd have to ask Joe that. So a lot of those different information sessions, we want as much feedback as we possibly can, because again, I said this over and over, and you guys are sick of me saying it. It is a living, breathing document. It's going to be driven by change, and the change, it comes from you all, comes from the students, comes from the faculty, comes from the staff, and we need that input. We need the wants, the needs, where we think we are at this point, and the whys. Why haven't we done this yet? What can we do to get this happen? What can we do so this can happen faster? So I think those are great things. So our fall objectives are basically part of what I just said. Identify and prioritize the academic investment. So with that is Chris Danik and I meeting with every single dean on this campus. So in the Chancellor's Retreat to Middlebrook that happened in August, I got up and did this presentation to all the deans and the Chancellor's direct reports. And then after that, I said to them, we are going to schedule meetings with you directly one-on-one with whoever you feel you need in that room with you to go through and talk about what your needs are and how things are going, where could there be improvement, how are you using the existing, buildings that you're in, and do you like being spread all over campus? I mean, it was amazing when we talked to Joanna Mezzalingua, how she is all over this campus. They have classes everywhere. And arts and sciences with, a card. I mean, it's hard to have classes all over. And I was blown away. I never realized, when talking to Michael Tick, Dean Tick, how much of campus that they occupy, from the warehouse all the way up to, they actually occupy a building at 1320 Ainsley Drive. They're in a warehouse that we have out there. That's where the sets are, and different pieces for Syracuse Stage. And I know that we had talked about having them utilize that space better, but how do they get the students there? There's only so much time between classes, and how do we get the students from down at the stage all the way up to Ainsley? So there's a lot of challenges with us, and we're trying to really focus on what I call the academic core, which is drawing a circle around from the Shine Center basically along Waverly all the way up to the Carrier Dome, around Deneen, up through Sims Drive, and then going down around the two Science and Tech buildings and saying, okay, this is our academic core. How do we make that such so that some of the support units aren't in these buildings? And you know, we have some buildings we really need to look at. I mean, anyone could step back and say, why would you use, you know, one of the premier buildings on campus, which is Sims, for public safety? Well, at the time, we weren't growing the way we are today, and we weren't thinking, you know, again, you can always say, why did you do that? So we'll go through these fall objectives to get the feedback from October, November. We're going to re-engage with the campus, the Framework Advisory Committee. That group needs to get back involved. We're going to do that this fall. I'm working on something with the Chancellor right now to put out that message to that group and to really look at that group and get them more engaged with the campus community. It can't just be one person. It can't just be me. So we're looking to broaden that a little bit. So again, we get into the near-term priorities and project, the urgency of infrastructure improvements. We've engaged with a company called ISES, who's actually, for the first time ever, one of the things that, you know, you don't walk into a new job blind. I needed to go in there and figure out exactly let's assess every single building on campus so we know truly what our conditions of our buildings are. So we should have that finished up this fall. I'm hoping, I think in another 2 or 3 weeks, they'll be done with that. We've asked them to do other things, so it's kind of slowed it down a little bit as we've got into it. And you know, that'll be a great benchmark for where we are on this campus. The access to government funding and support, that'll help drive, obviously, what the near-term projects are. Funding is a big piece of this, and what we can get from the state or what we can get from local government will help that. Campus and community input. We had a meeting up at South Campus this summer with I think they're called the East Neighborhood Group, and they've been very vocal on moving students around and building new residence halls, how that will affect the Euclid neighborhood area. And we're very concerned about that. And Chief Callisto spoke at that meeting with me, talking about some things that happened when we built Deneen Hall, when we built the West Campus building, and when they built Centennial Hall down at ESF, what that did when it took people out of those rental properties. Identify and align the physical presence of the academic priorities through ongoing conversations with the deans and unit leaders. Chris and I are actively involved in that. Continuous review of existing facilities. I can't emphasize that enough because they change and grow, and there's always needs. In the ADA facilities audit, we have 2 different groups working on that. We asked ISES to take that on as well, and I know through Aaron's office, Hadukovic, I hope I pronounced that right, he is also engaged with Danny on an ADA facilities audit, and we are tracking that very closely. Campus priorities and projects. Obviously, this is one that's been out there a lot. People are very aware of this. This is the National Veterans Resource Complex. This rendering's spot on. So this is where we're going with this building. We're going to try to build this as close to this as possible. We need to really take a look at the square footage in the building. We told SHOP, and we basically said to them, we're going to give you a clean slate, a clean palette to work from, and don't worry about that you've got to reserve X amount of parking spots from what came out of there. Obviously, there's ADA spots that are going to be all down the eastern side of the building that are covered to work with people with accessibility issues to get into the building. The building is obviously 100% accessible. This will be the most accessible building on our campus without a doubt, but the only building of this kind in the United States. So we're very proud of this building, and to move around through this building will be very easy. This building has, I believe, 6 classrooms, 4 or 6 classrooms, I don't remember all the program right now, and a very large area for research. So it was important for us to add classrooms to the campus, and we're excited about that. It'll help everybody with that. Again, this is a rendering of what the arch renovation could look like or will look like. This is something we've been working on with Populous and with Rebecca Reed Kantowitz's group in the health center. So basically, when this renovation starts, we're calling it building A, B, and C. So the part closest to me, which is the southernmost building, you'll notice is all the way out to the sidewalk by ESF. We actually own that property right up to the end of the sidewalk. This is an addition. We would actually remove the existing pool area, and basically from the peak of that smaller arch all the way to here is an addition and a renovated part of the building. You notice that we keep the old original building that was part of the original arch construction. That will be the new health center on campus. So we're going to bring the health center and the rec center together as one building. There was a group, Rebecca sent some of her staff to 5 or 6 different new buildings on different college campuses this summer to look at what they did and how they integrated the two. We're very excited about this. We put offers out. We sent out RFPs last week to 5 or 7 construction managers. We're hoping to have those back by the next week or two, and we will be hoping to put a shovel in the ground in December. So we have some challenges with that. It'll be after the students leave. We've got to keep Flanagan up and running the entire time that this construction is going on. All of rec services will move to the women's building. That's been very challenging. I'll tell you, for Chris Stanek, I don't know how he does it, but we need to find space. We had to think about the people that were in that building. We had to move everybody from Ryan Williams' group out of there, and then both our OTC programs, and there was quite a few different things. I don't know if people realize there's an old rifle range in the basement of this building that was still active, so we had to help our OTC figure out what we were going to do with that, and with some other people on our staff, we've got them out at 1330. We did a nice renovation for them out there. But so again, Joe Laurie's group will all move over to the women's building. We need Flanagan to continue to be up and running throughout the construction, so we need to run temporary power, restrooms, and we're going to actually put an elevator in Flanagan so that we meet all the ADA needs of the building and bring it up to compliance. So that'll be a huge part of this. And you notice that we've been digging up the road of ESF. That was to remove a 24-inch water main that would have gone underneath this new addition. So now that water main runs in the road and is tying in after the water main comes out where that orange car is under the overhead. Over in this sidewalk, the new will tie into the old. Along with that, we dropped in some valves and some taps for ESF, because where Lincoln is on the horse, ESF's building a huge building there this March, a big science and research building. So you'll have both construction projects going on at the same time. They're going to close down the parking lot that's on the southern side of Flanagan as a laydown area. So all that parking will go away. We have to deal with that, Joe Carpy and Dee, with dome events, because we do utilize some of that. We've told the contractor that we need these spots back for dome events and special events at the university, even though that'll be part of the construction fenced off area. And then again, the Campus West, the dome piece, moving target right now. We're at a pretty good place. We've really focused lately on the dome roof. It was one of the things that the trustees were very concerned that we replace first, one of the first projects out of the renovation. A lot of what so there's actually 3 projects. So there's the roof, there's the interior improvements, and then there's the exterior improvements, enhancements. So as we go through that, we're going to have 3 different projects that we're trying to price up to get to the big number of what we were told we were allowed to spend for both arch and the dome. But we're finally at a good place on the roof. I would think that right after December we'll be able to go to the Board of Trustees and say, here's where we are. That will then affect a lot of the different things that happen around the building, some of the sports schedules, some of the academic things that happen in the dome with commencement and convocations. And we've had some conversations with the Chancellor about that. Our goal is to put the new roof over the old roof and to not lose a football or basketball game. That's our goal. Again, as we get into this a little bit deeper, we're still working on different materials to cover the roof. We're trying to tie that together, and we're working very closely with how we're going to deal with accessibility for me to have my maintenance guys get up on the roof, work on the roof, how the two connect on the existing ring beam, how that's going to work through the year where we're lifting the trusses over the existing roof. So that's a very tricky one. But one of the things on the enhancements to the building, the students, when we did this survey, it was because of the survey Sasaki did, It's the first place the students go when they come for their convocation, and they obviously go there for commencement. What was asked was that they are able to see into the dome all year long. So some of the facade that you'll see around some of the sides of the building, we're actually looking at how to take some of that concrete down and open it up so people can see into the building from the main quad. As you walk by to look in there, and the students asked if it was possible to have a quad that was available all winter long, which would obviously be the dome turf, and it's something we're looking at how we could make that happen. So again, always the fan experience is number one, different enhancements inside the building to always make the game day experience the best it could be in the country. I think we're ready for questions. No problem. Do we have a microphone? We said we were going to pass it around. Sir, are we going to pass a microphone around if anybody has any questions? Does anybody have any questions?
Well, we've got a couple of questions here. So, thank you, Pete. You have a question. Okay. One thing that we've been doing better and better, that I've been realizing, myself especially, we started with data, right? So the My Campus survey that was done in 2014 with Sasaki, before this plan came out, we tracked over 3,000 responses from folks, where they're moving, how they're moving, what they're using, how they're using it. Data has become a real driver of what we're doing, and without a doubt, I think we've talked about all the sessions we're planning, as well as already what we've gathered. So part of the data is qualitative, and that's getting in touch with folks who write in. We have 5 frequently asked questions, give or take, because Pete's done such a great job today, covering the topics of what people are asking. So before we launch into a more informal Q&A session with you all, we'd like to share in a little, informal dialogue of what folks are already asking, and give some of the answers to that, just so maybe we can all be on the same page about where folks' priorities are, and maybe, hopefully, answer questions that you have now. So, the first one on my list here is if the student housing is all moved from South Campus to this area, the North Campus area, the university neighborhood, what does that look like for the university neighborhood?
Well, I don't want to answer your question with a question, but are you asking how it looks for where we're going to build these residence halls, or how does it look for what I call the East neighborhood, which is off of Euclid? I mean, we've addressed both. We're very concerned with the East neighborhood. We've met with the common councilors. So one of the things that I was asked to do this summer was to set up meetings with 2 common councilors at a time, all the common councilors that are tied to the city of Syracuse, right? So we did that. We met down at City Hall, and it was great. I mean, and this is the question, that question got asked more than any, of what we thought of the developers that were looking at student housing that weren't part of the university, and how we thought it was going to affect the East neighborhood. And what was our goal? Is our goal to take every single student and put them on North Campus, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, sophomores, or freshmen and sophomores? What is our goal? And we basically answer that question is, it would be great to have the freshmen and the sophomores on North Campus. I mean, obviously that's not something we could do right away, but it's something that's a goal that I think is achievable over time, and it's something that we're looking at. The other question you always get is from that same group, well, what's going to happen with South Campus? I don't think South Campus will ever go away. I mean, there was a very short life expectancy on those buildings that were built back in the 70s. I think 72, 73, 70, 71 when those buildings went up. I experienced them building those buildings, so I know what the quality of that construction is. I was really little, but I mean, it's still, when you go up there, we know that there's a lot that has to happen to those buildings. So from the upperclassmen side, I think there would still be an opportunity for juniors and seniors to be up there. We get a lot of pushback with sophomores, parents, and we try to never put a freshman up there. It has happened in the past once or twice, but it's not something we want to do. So our engagement with the common councilors was all really focused towards, you're going to have an issue with that if you start creating all this housing. And Tony Clisto can speak to it very well, and he did. what happens with the students that move out of that east neighborhood? Because the homes there are set up for student housing. It's not like you can go buy that house and convert it into something that you can live in a lot of times because it's been lived in by students for the last 30 years.
And the point's there too. When we did the research in 2014, we asked folks who lived out at South Campus, how do you like this? What do you think? And there's a lot of positivity that comes with living in South Campus. We also heard that there's also a feeling of disconnectedness. When you're out there, you're there. When you're here, you're here. While that can be good, it's my understanding that what we're trying to do is increase engagement, increase the liveliness of our community. When we talk about these promenades and these different walkways and places to move, we're talking about the connective tissue between the parts of this organization and our community. And part of that's people. So bringing people here, keeping them connected. There are two questions that have also, in that same vein, been frequently asked, and one of them is, so if we're moving folks to this area, maybe in this plan, one of the properties mentioned is 744 Ostrom. That's where the Daily Orange currently sets up their shop. And I think everybody knows that everybody reads the DO. What happens to that location? And is it in the plan to see that go away or shift, or what happens there?
It's not much different from the question that gets asked about the Sheridan. So again, if you go to the framework document, it does show a residence hall. The university does own all those, what I call stick frame homes that are along Ostrom. Is there a plan, tomorrow to get in there and knock those houses down, Eddie? No. At this point, is it going to happen in the next 2 years? No. And if you look at what happened here when we first started talking about the framework, again, it's something that's evolving, right? So if the funding were there, it was something that we thought we could do, and where it wouldn't impact, the existing plan. Some projects are going to move ahead of others. I don't see that happening, tomorrow. I think there's other opportunities for us when it comes to student housing. We've looked at remodeling Watson. We've looked at adding on to Booth Hall. We're doing our research. We've had Sasaki do some market research for us to look around to some of the different buildings, how we can enhance the existing residence halls, where we can add, where we can take away. So I think when it comes to answering that question, I think the Daily Orange is safe for a while. Depends on the article they write about us, right? How soon we go.
I didn't say you did.
No.
Yeah. So, well, something else that's always present when we're talking about the framework is the entire Fast Forward initiative. And a question that's been asked is, how does the campus framework work together with the academic strategic plan? I know you've talked about it a little bit. I felt it throughout the presentation, but maybe there are a couple points you'd like to make directly.
Well,
there.
again, so the first person I met when we came back from Middlebrook was, the provost. Michelle has a very strong, she's very passionate about, bringing these two together. So you can't do that without the engagement with the deans, and then obviously it's going to need to trickle down to some of the faculty. And that's why we encourage the deans to bring different people to the meetings, Eddie. So we get the feedback from the people who are on the ground. I'll say that the meeting that TC set up at Byrd Library was probably one of the best meetings I've ever been to. We had a meeting with David Seaman and his group. His entire staff attended. The question and answer period was great. It helped us really understand what goes on at Byrd Library, what their needs are, how we do tie it into the academic strategic plan. Again, a lot of it's just tied to, the fact that there are, some people that will say there's not enough classrooms on this campus. Sasaki, on the other hand, would say that if we had more classes on Friday, we have plenty of classrooms, right? So you've got to make that work. You've got to get people together to say, all right, let's take a look at what we're currently doing and what we can do to make all these different things work. And then you look at what research needs to happen, and you look at the different research dollars that are coming in, where the grants are, how we can blend the two together. That's very, very important. And obviously, we'd really like the next project out from the framework to be a big academic component. It's something that we talk about all the time. So obviously the ADA enhancement happen all the time, But the classroom improvements with Sam's group's happening all the time. We know we're going to do those next summer, but what's the next big project?
It speaks to the way that the framework is really bolstering where the academic strategy is going.
Sure.
We're here to build it out. You know, the other questions that have come up have to do with parking. I think you've talked quite a bit about how parking is being managed and given some resources for folks to, you know, reach out. And so if you're feeling like you're not getting what you need, or your colleagues are feeling as though they're not getting what they need, that's something we're always interested in hearing about and how we can do it better. I think really we've covered this list, and you've done a really great job with the slide deck and sharing all of these things that we're excited about. So I'm thinking it would be a good time to open up the floor to questions from everybody else.
So you don't have a parking question?
Would you like me to ask a parking question?
I get them asked them all the time. I don't need, if you don't want to ask me one, that's
Can you
fine.
get me in the stadium
Where's
line?
Joe and Dee? Did they leave? Of course, so they're not here to answer them, but I mean, the important thing was with the parking, I mean, Joe, and I think it's important that we tell people this, that Tony Callisto, myself, Joe, at the time Lou Marcoscia, John Sardino, I mentioned, Tom Benzel, there was a group of us that got together and we looked at all the parking impact and how do we get smarter about what we're doing on campus, where we can move people to that it won't really impact their day-to-day life here. You know, one of the important things that we did was really look at people's years of service, understand where people work every day, people with disabilities, making sure that we can take care of those. And then I thought was a huge step was Tony Callisto stepping up to the plate and saying that they're going to move all the public safety cars out of the Q4 lot. I believe it's Q4, right? Over there behind Life Science. And they're going to end up in the basement of Booth, right? Help me, Joe. So that's a project that we are going to do before the end of the fall semester. Okay, so don't make me a liar, Joe. You got to say, yes, that's going to happen. You're going to do it, right, buddy? But it's something I know that's on the table we've been working on. That's going to open up a lot of spots and help a lot of people on that side of campus.
So if you work for Pete, don't come to these meetings.
Because I'm putting you on the spot. Do you have any questions? Yes, sir.
Hang on, we have a mic for you.
I have a comment and a question. The first comment is looking through all the building designs and everything that you have in your pamphlet and in the slideshow today. A lot of the design that I see that you guys are looking at implementing, there's a lot of glass on the street, and I think that's interesting. But I see around campus, and I think this is maybe particularly endemic of schools that have architecture programs, I don't know. But there's a lot of buildings that were very cutting edge when they were built that are kind of architectural leisure suits now, right? Like we have to live with them.
Great comment.
And looking at the buildings that you guys are proposing, a lot of them, frankly, will not age well. We know that, looking at them, the glass and the metal and and it just seems to me not just an aesthetic question, but a sustainability question about designing something that's going to last at a human scale with materials that don't need to be replaced as often. So that's the first comment. The second is a wider question about, the 5 key recommendations are enliven the civic realm. These are the ones that stand out for my question. Create a campus city community. Integrate diverse, inclusive student life activities, and establish mixed-use neighborhoods. Now, those seem deeply enmeshed with larger questions of the Syracuse community at large. And your presentation barely addressed the Syracuse community at large. There are certain things, you look on the map and it's like, I know for a fact, you get to Marshall Street and there's kind of active street life there. You get to Adams and it falls apart, right? And all of your maps stop at Adams Street. And I just wonder why there's no sense of contiguity running down Irving, running down Krause, or even running down University all the way to Genesee, right? Running down Adams Street to downtown, there's no sense in your plans for contiguity between the larger community and what's happening on campus. And I just wonder if you could address that.
Well, number one, we don't own that property.
Right.
So
In
there's
terms
only
of
so much we can
conversations
do.
with the city at large,
Okay,
you mentioned that you've
there's
been going to
been
city
many-
council meetings.
Yep, there's been many conversations. So right now, at this given time, there's 7 developers trying to do things below Adams, which is troubling to Syracuse University. Okay, they're coming at us hard. And we're dealing with that with the common councilors as well. I didn't talk about that because I wasn't sure that was really something we can talk about. And then the change of 81. So we're involved in that. Can we voice our opinion on what we'd like to see with 81? Not publicly. But I can say that the direction they're going, I think it's favorable to Syracuse University. It's going to tie that west side of campus into that part of the city community. I really feel like as we grow, and we do own property down to past by the UAG garage on the western side of it, and there's other opportunities for us to look. We own a Marshall Square Mall, and as we talk to Whitman and other schools who want to, expand their college a little bit, there's opportunities for us there. We'll tie that together when we actually figure out with the city what development's going to happen there. We can't actively go down to the city hall and bang our hands on the table and say, we don't want that developer to build that on that city block. We can't do that. We can go down and say, hey, you've seen our framework. They know what we want to do. They've seen how we want to tie the two together. There are some that are going to make sense. Some have already happened that we can't control. I mean, it's a great question. I mean, how do you do that? And that looks right into that streetscape as you come up from University Ave, right? That's part of what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that the question, and I hear everything that you're saying, and how much agency do we have off
Right.
campus, right? But in terms of enlivening the civic realm, okay, so we put students more in contact with each other, but that doesn't really improve town and gown issues having students completely insular, right? I've been at several other schools that I've worked at. St. Joe's in Philadelphia, where it was like the campus was kind of sequestered from the rest of the city. It was in Winfield, which is a city in West Philly. Hobart and William Smith colleges, the school is very set apart from the rest of Geneva. And getting the students involved in community work was very difficult because the architecture of the campus actually resisted that kind of work. And so I just think it's something worth thinking more about.
So let's just continue on here, because you're going down the right road. So let's talk about the campus, the East neighborhood. Okay, let's talk about Euclid.
Yeah.
So there is, when we met with the common councilors, there is an ongoing discussion with the East neighborhood that they want storefronts down the northern side of Euclid Avenue. They have a plan as well that's going to do exactly what you just said. I think you said tie town and gown together, right? I mean, you talked about that. So we know, in order to be a good neighbor of the rest of the city of Syracuse, we have to make sure that we have students living in that East neighborhood to keep that a vibrant community. We know, we have history, we now police that neighborhood after 2008 because we didn't do a good job of what you just said. We built Ernie Davis, we built the West Campus, and we built the Centennial Hall. The amount of students that came out of that East neighborhood and started leaving some of those buildings empty, and they had trouble renting there, and you saw a lot of different owners sell properties there, became an issue for Syracuse University. Tony Callisto in the city, that's how one of the agreements with the city started. So you're spot on. It's how do we make sure that we continue to do that? The goal of that is the first question that I get asked every time I'm in City Hall. Are you thinking of moving every single student to North Campus? Absolutely not. We could never house 14,000 students on North Campus. We're going to be lucky to get all the freshmen and most of the sophomores. And that's a goal. That's not something we're doing now. We don't do it now. And then imagine 7 developers that are knocking on City Hall and coming to us and saying, hey, we want to build a 17-story building where the eye doctor is. I mean, is that something Syracuse University wants? It's not something that any of us want, but we can't run down to City Hall and say, stop these guys. It's got to go through its due diligence. It goes through a process. And I think as things flow and come out of what the framework is and how we look at where we're going to put our residence halls and how we look at different buildings that are going to go on the west side of the dome, we're opening up the west side of campus to the downtown area. When that bridge comes down on 81, not that I know what's going on down there, okay, not that I know what's going on down there, it's going to open that whole thing up. Okay, right. Well, that ties Syracuse University into the Martin Luther King School like that. So now we become a partner with that part of the city. especially if we change the way we look at that whole side of the campus.
I mean, I'd like to see more of that talk in the plans.
We can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I've got some of my talking experts listening to what we're saying today, but we definitely can do that. But again, I can only talk to what we own, and it's hard to really derive what's happening with the city. But it's a great question, because that is the first question that when you sit down with the common councilors, what they talk about is the East neighborhood. They are so protective of that property, and they want us to actually make sure we understand what goes on the northeast side, which is down towards Fayette, on that side, over by the Chancellor's residence, towards Washington Arms and Thornton Park. All those are big players.
Even just the text, enliven the civic realm doesn't mention the city at large.
Right.
Right, so things like that would be nice to see that there's an MO in it to
No, it's a great question. I'm really glad you asked the question. I hope I answered it for you.
Hi, my name is Kate, and I'm the administrative assistant at the Disability Cultural Center. I'm very happy to be here. I really enjoyed the presentation. I just had a question. Well, first of all, I have a comment. I really like the idea about the rounded benches where people can see each other that you brought up. I think that's great for deaf culture. I really like that. So I'm in full support of that idea. And I just had a question about the heated ramp. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the heated ramp. And I feel like I hadn't heard that before. Like, there's a wheelchair accessible ramp that's going to be heated.
So there's the new ramp that's going in at Link is heated. All the entranceway to the Shine is heated. The ramp that goes up to the monument is heated. All the steps on all the plinths are heated in some of the outlying areas. We're working on that right now. I don't want to go too fast. We're working on that right now to connect those to the buildings. The Shine and both Newhouse play a big role in those heated areas. And then again, we're going to address over time the front entrance to Bird Library as well. But you'll see some of the things that we've heated. I don't like one of my pet peeves on this campus is that I don't see how you can pour a set of steps in this environment and not try to put some type of heating in it. So, there's a lot that's heated where the snow comes down off the roof of the carrier dome. People don't even realize that that's heated. So what happens is we heat this building, these campuses, buildings with steam. The byproduct of that is condensation, which is a very high temperature water that comes off the steam. To me, it's a free heat. You heat the antifreeze, the glycol that goes into you use a heat exchanger to heat that product to melt the snow. It's kind of a real down, quick, dirty version of it. It does actually sometimes. We have to put a different heat exchanger in that's run through steam, but it's an easy way to do it. We did a lot of it around campus planning, design and construction, did a ton of work around Arch a couple of years ago, and that's worked out wonderfully. Again, Holden Observatory, that entire ramp is heated last summer.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, my question was in regards to the three major projects, Veterans Resource Complex, the Arch, and the Dome. What stages, along with projections for design, bid dates, and construction start dates are all three of them projects in?
Right now, we're just in the phase of engaging with construction managers of each one of them. We are down the road with obviously design. Let's start with the NDRC. So we know where the building's going to be built. We have just sent out proposals for construction managers. We plan on interviewing all of them in a couple weeks. That project is, still in design phase, in the programming phase with Mike Haney's group and Ron Novak and everybody from the IVMF. So we're quite a ways from actually starting that construction. On the Dome or Arch, Populous has been engaged with us now for over a year. Rebecca Reed-Cantuitz put a team together along with a student group. Again, Joe Laurie met with Sasaki, and we had a lot of student involvement and engagement with Sasaki to lead the programming for Arch and the health and wellness. Again, Rebecca had people visit, I believe, 7 different colleges this summer that have engaged in the same discussion and same design that we have and built the new model of a health and wellness building together. So we are in the process. We sent out the construction manager proposals last week. Mark, am I correct in that? And we're expecting them back this week, and we will interview those. That project's moving as fast as we can with that. We're hoping that we would, in the spring semester, start the work there. Jennifer is still doing some work with the city on permitting. And the dome is still very conceptual. We still have a lot of work to do.
But with that, for anyone that has an idea, anyone that has access to students or access to learning experience where you're thinking about the dome, send it to us. If you think of something that you wish that you saw on this campus, if you wish to see a bench in a certain place, a certain way to form, to make a part of this plan, which meets all the other plans, send it to us. These are the kinds of things that we're always looking to hear from, and this is really, really helpful.
You're not allowed to ask questions.
Recently you were in the paper regarding the dome and air conditioning in the dome. My question is there any chance that the dome being in it the way it is right now, is there any chance before the renovation comes that there could be some way to get air conditioning in the dome now versus until the dome is finished, just to make sure it
again,
works?
that could be part of the phasing. I mean, it's something we've talked about forever and ever. Our goal, and Nate Pryor's here who runs the steam station, is that we have a chilled water plant at the steam station. We're looking at capacity. It's something that we are definitely thinking about doing. It's a conceptual, we're in the design, it's on the wish list, all those things. Yes, it's the carrier dome. I mean, it's one of the biggest questions. How do you have carrier on that building, which is a huge air conditioning manufacturer, and the dome's not air conditioned, right? But we would have to phase that in, and again, that's something that's not hard to phase in, because the existing infrastructure with the fans and how the air is moved through the building and how the building works, it's basically bringing chilled water in, putting in a whole nother set of coils for the chilled water, and then cooling the building. Again, it ties to other projects on campus, but could we do it, to answer your question, before the renovation? Yeah, but again, the dome projects, we're still trying to figure out where we really are with cost, and obviously from a fan enhancement, that's a priority. So basically what happened was Stephen Ponte called me and said, is air conditioning something you guys are thinking about? I said, yes, it's one of many different things we're thinking about. 5 minutes later, it was in the paper, and I had Kevin Quinn calling me. So I'm like, it was also part of what we talked about when we talked about the dome in May, and I stood at the top of the tunnel and said, one of the things we're looking at is air conditioning. One of the things we're looking at is seats with arms. One of the things we're looking at is all the ADA enhancements. Changing the roof, bringing in more light. One of many things that's on the table in discussions with the carrier dome. All right, I think we're good. Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate you guys spending time with us this afternoon, going through this.